I was just talking with a couple business owners last night. We were talking about goals and dreams and all of that good stuff.
And learning how to be their client at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. Smart move.
Yeah, it's been helpful. So like right now we're in the process of finding flip number one. All right, guys, we are back with another episode. Today I have what I would call the OG of social media with us today, Shon Christy. So he's a guy that whenever someone brings up, oh, you're starting a social media company, you need to talk to this guy, I've had like 10 people tell me to reach out. So Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today I got a lot of stuff, but I want to read a quote to you. And I saw this on some guy's story, and I want to talk to you about it. But It says, if you already live a comfortable life, then choosing to make more money but live a worse daily life is a bad trade. And yet we talk ourselves into it all the time. We take promotions that pay more but swallow our free time. We already have a successful business, but we break ourselves trying to make it even more successful. Too much focus on wealth, not enough focus on lifestyle. So why did you share that?
I was just talking with a couple business owners last night. We were talking about goals and dreams and all of that good stuff. And then we just started talking about, are we living to work or working to live? What does that look like? And I really thought about it, man. Being an entrepreneur to me is it's about freedom and not just the dollar. And so we kind of got a little philosophical over a couple blue moons last night. And one of my buddies said that. I'm like, that was great, man. I'm going to write that down. So I took notes. And I'm like, I'm posting that to my story. So that guy sounds pretty smart, whoever shared that.
Yeah, sounds like it. So when you started all of this, give me a little timeline. Did you always know I'm going to be a marketing guy? Like, how did you make the decision of this is what I want to do with my life?
Kind of by accident, really. So went to school, the University of Akron College of Business, for marketing. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and this was a long time ago. So we were just launching entrepreneurship programs at the university. So I took the class, and I was trying to figure out, man, like, what do I want to do? And I couldn't figure out what that thing was. And I remember sitting there going, man, I just wish there was some way like I could make connections and build a business out of connectivity, because that's what I've always loved, like being in Greek life and a part of Sigma Nu and just seeing the network of people in fraternities and sororities and student government and those types of things on a big campus. Like, I loved introducing people and just kind of seeing where those connections would go. But at that time, I couldn't really put the pieces together. Fast forward to 2009-10, doing my master's degree, about the time when Facebook was going to .edu to .com. So because I was doing my master's and I had managed a group of students, they got me involved in Facebook. And it was back in the time you had to have the .edu address. And so it was big on college campuses, but not really mainstream. And when I was on, and when my son was born, he had some significant health challenges. And I remember that, I had to figure something else out to, take care of the family. And I'm like, man, I'm going to put this post out. And I talked about Beckett being born with Down syndrome and that he had some health challenges, would appreciate your prayers. And then we were doing this fundraiser, and we raised thousands of dollars overnight. And I was in a hospital. It took 15 seconds. I'd never raised that much money ever, and I didn't really even do anything, and money just appeared. And I was like, like there's something to this. And so started to dig in the hospital, and couldn't find any social media niche companies in Ohio. Could actually only find one in the entire country at that time in 2010, and it was Likeable Media with Dave Kerpen. He's still alive and well and kicking and doing great things, but he was working with Fortune 100 companies at the time, and I'm thinking, okay, if these companies are seeing the value in the social media at that level, it's just a matter of time before it goes into the small to medium-sized companies. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Took out like all my 401k, all my savings, went all in, started this company, quit my job, and just said, all right, I'm going to figure it out, burn the boats on the shore and just go, and there's no retreat. Now I got to do this thing, and it ended up working really good. Year one was very challenging because nobody understood it. I was told things like, oh, this is for cat videos and pictures of food. There's no business play here. And I'm like, it's a communication vehicle. Like, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I know it's there.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 2024, and it's the number one marketing medium on the planet.
Yeah. So when you first were on Facebook, what would a piece of content look like? Think of like the 2009-10 era.
It was like I think there was a prompt that would be like Shon Christy is ... and then I would put something in there that would say excited about the future. So it was just like little prompts of verbiage.
But you weren't saying why.
Yeah, it was just like excited about the future. Like, people were doing updates about how they felt about something, and then they started to layer in like the pictures and the videos. And then when I started, there weren't even business pages yet. So people were creating businesses as people and, messing that whole thing up. And, you had the limits. And back in those days too, everybody, they didn't have an algorithm. So you put something out there and everybody that was following your page would see it. So the numbers were huge.
And so, because it was the wall back then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the wall. So there was, everything was based off the person, not the topic.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then when did you start to see a shift to where, okay, now businesses are seeing this? Maybe they don't see the value, but they're having more conversations with you.
So because it was kind of unique and interesting, people had a lot of interest around it, but it's like anything else. You've got like those early adopters and then you have your laggards. And, we're still seeing people getting on board with social media today, all these years later. But I think we're definitely down in that laggard stage now when it comes to it. But there was a ton of interest, but nobody wanted to spend money on it yet. So I just remember, okay, like I'm really going to have to go out and get into public speaking to talk about this thing because people just didn't understand it. Like in a networking event, if I met you and I started talking to you about it, you'd be like, like I don't really understand what's going on here. So I just signed up to speak at as many places as I could. And we would always pack that, like wall-to-wall people, standing room only. There was a lot of interest because of the curiosity, but nobody was ready to pull that trigger. So it probably took about a year and a half before I really started to get some traction with it. It was a rough first year. And what I actually had to do to show value was, because people weren't buying it, either I was a terrible salesperson or they just didn't understand it, or choice C, all the above. But I would give it away to nonprofits because I never wanted to give it away to a company that could afford it. But like, hey, like I'm a philanthropic guy. I love helping people. And so I'm just going to go connect with some nonprofits that I believe in, that I think I can help because it worked for this Down syndrome thing that I did. So why can't I reproduce this thing with somebody else? And I said, hey, if I worked with you for 60 days, showed you some value, would you be interested in talking about a more longer term deal that was paid? And so I led with value and then ended up doing a ton of work in the nonprofit space at first. And then historically, we're probably at close to 1,000 clients served since inception. And I would say about 30% of those have been nonprofits because they talk about social media as the gasoline of emotion, right? Yeah. And so like people get emotional about the things like these, like whether it's pets or, some kind of healthcare charity, it's easy to get people engaged.
There's a connection
involved.
point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing I notice with a lot of wealthy people I've met is it's not that they don't want to donate, it's they don't know where. They want to just feel like I know my money's going to somewhere. And was that kind of the big challenge in messaging, was just getting the word out? Or did you feel like there was a lot of strategy behind it with the nonprofits?
Well, so in the early days, we were the first movers. We were the first ones doing this thing. And so I think that we were able to stand out. So one of the things that I talk about and that I do research on and I'm writing my book on is the concept that attention is the new currency. Pete Cashmore said that. And so because we were the only ones out there in the spotlight, we were getting all of that attention. Fast forward to today, you log on Giving Tuesday and you've got 1 million charities that are like, hey, give to us, we exist, give to us, we exist. So today you absolutely have to have a strategy, and we did back then, but it was significantly easier because we were the only ones playing in the sandbox at that time.
So to someone out there, let's say they started a business a year ago and they want to get into content. Do you think that it's still too late? Is it too early? Or do you think content creators are always going to keep happening?
I think content creators are always going to, I think the platforms are going to change. But I think content creation is always where it's going to be. There's been the pendulum shift from mass media owning the megaphone to now everyone owns the megaphone if they want to. The problem is I think people are self-conscious about doing it and they're afraid to start. And it's like anything else. You just have to start. And we talk about Hormozy all the time.
The first videos.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you just have to get it going and do it the first time and get better every single time. And pretty soon you're going to be an expert and a pro, and you're going to look at the things that you did a year or 2 years ago, and you're going to be like, that was terrible. I can't believe anybody listened to it, but you did it and no one else is doing it. So again, you're standing out just by talking about whatever you're talking about.
I think I told you this on the call, but the first time I made my own videos, so 2 years I'm doing it for everyone else, but I was too much of a chicken to do it for me. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. It's like 9 p.m. So I filmed this video unedited, and I realized half of my face is not even in the frame. But I'm so mad because I didn't want to refilm it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to edit this and post it either way. And I got like 10 comments that were like, why are you out of the frame? But what that did is it stirred it to more people. And I was like, okay, at least I ripped that Band-Aid off.
Yep. Engagement is engagement.
It is, yeah. And I think a lot of people out there don't give themselves that maybe it's grace, where it's like, it's pretty extreme to think you're going to be good the first video.
Yeah.
Like even my first podcast, I mean, I think I did it and then I was wiped for like a day or two because it was so hard to come in here, be present and have that conversation when I'd never done it.
Yep. Just start. The snowball's got to go down the hill.
What are like the signs you see of the people that are going to make it as a long-term creator versus like maybe they have an unhealthy mindset and they get that quick burnout where they're like, hey, I want to do this, but then you already see maybe some mental blocks they're going to run into that they don't address?
I think discipline is the first thing. So you have to understand where you want to go, reverse engineer that back, and then build out a plan that you can commit to, and then the discipline to do the daily things, whether that's, hey, I'm going to do one a week, I'm going to do one a month, whatever those things are. But I think it's A, get started, B, build momentum and learn from that. And then pretty soon it's going to be like riding a bike and you're just cruising down the street. So I think the discipline of execution is the hardest thing to do. It's what most people are not willing to do because they let other things get in the way. It's not a priority to them.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've recently been working on is, we try to have a done for you thing where it's like we film it, edit it, write the caption, post it, but it's still, there is that part where it's like you have to talk and be yourself and work on talking.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just an expectation that no matter what, you can't delegate being yourself.
Sure. And I think it's, what are the things that you're passionate about? And talk about those things because it's going to come naturally. I think one of the challenges becomes if people are forcing things because they think somebody wants to hear something, that's when it becomes difficult. Just talk about the things that are unique to you, whatever your personal brand is, whatever you're about. Talk about those things, and you're going to find other people out there that are looking for that type of content or that can align with that mindset and want to hear more and more and more.
And I think the cool thing maybe recently is how everything's kind of shifting to topic-based versus user-based, because I ask everyone, I'm like, what do you consume? And I've noticed it's not necessarily names anymore. Like when I asked that question 3 or 4 years ago, it's I like this person, that person. Now it's basketball videos. I like real estate podcasts. And then it kind of shifted. So how have you adapted to that shift? And is it something you saw happening?
So I definitely think that's happening. I think that is where social media is going to go. So right now we have these huge monster platforms where it's all things to all people, and they keep bolting in extra functionalities. And so it's just this huge ocean. I think the future of it is going to be more niche community-based type apps. That way, like I'm swimming in the pond with all of the fish that are like me for this thing that I want to talk about. Instead of having to swim through the ocean and try to find those fish, like I can just dive into this pond and do that type of thing. So I think that that's a very important point to reference for the future. And as far as what we're doing, we're trying to do that for our clients. For example, we just started doing some work with a large national accounting firm. And instead of just talking about accounting services to everyone, we did a deep dive and we took a look at, where is the largest group for them in each of their core areas in each of these states. And then we looked at those top 3 niches and we decided we're going to be experts and we're going to talk about those niches. And we're still going to get other groups to work with us because accounting's accounting, right? But if we're really strong in technology or agriculture or construction, let's focus on those things and start talking directly to those people in the language that they speak, because they're going to be looking for someone who they feel knows them.
Yeah, because that's another big thing. Who are you making the content for? So when you're coming in to meet with these people, do you find that they even know who their who is a lot of the time?
I would say it's a coin flip. So I think it's mission critical. We call it creating audience-centric content. I think that you have to understand where do you want to go. So what are the goals? How do we measure? We need to know if we're winning or losing every day, week, month, year. And then from there, who do we need to speak to help us do this thing that we said was our goal? And then we have to create all the content around that leads us back to whatever those metrics are. So yeah. I think it's absolutely critical to do that. I think that sometimes they're like, well, we could work with anyone. And so, when you speak to everyone, you speak to no one, right? And so we really try to get into not only, hey, it's females that are 35 to 45 that live in this area, but also the psychographic, are they outdoor adventure? Do they like to sit at the beach and read a book? Like those things matter. And so when you're segmenting the audience, it's both demographic and psychographic. I think you really need to know. And sometimes they don't know. And so why don't we talk to your top 10% of customers? Like, who are your best customers? Let's talk to them and find out what they value and what are they looking for? Or, hey, let's go to people that aren't our client yet. And, where do you go for this information? And then we take all of that, we cross-reference it, and then we start to create content as a result of that.
Yeah. So a lot of it is very, yeah, because that was something I struggled with in the beginning. I think year one was like, I'll work with anyone.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, this sucks. I'm not getting better at anything. And I stress myself out. And then luckily, I think it was a Bigger Pockets book I read. And I was like, I'm going to try to go into the real estate because I myself want to invest. But then I knew that if I could provide that value, like you talked about, where maybe I learned what a home inspector needs, I learned what a realtor needs. Now I'm actually learning how to be their client at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Smart move.
Yeah, and it's been helpful. So like right now we're in the process of finding flip number one, and I have a walkthrough actually right after this. So yeah, but it wasn't something I could have done if I didn't pick a lane. And so when you see a lot of these companies out there, do you think that the issue is that they do go too wide, or do you think people more go too narrow?
No, I think they go way too wide.
Yeah.
You know, I think in theory, they're casting this net and they're like, oh, we've got this really wide net. And when we pull it, back to the boat, we're going to have all these fish. And they might not be just tuna, might be all kinds of different fish, but we're going to have a lot of fish. But what happens is the net is so big and the holes are so wide in the net, the fish just swim through it. So I think having that, the right lure, we talk about lures, you have to have what's attractive to that fish to catch it. And so different fish are going to react differently to different lures. And so you need to understand that and put the right lure in the water, because if everybody's doing the net and you have that special lure, you're going to be the one that reels in those big fish.
Yeah. So have you always worked with the big fish? Because I would say now, I mean, based off your last few Facebook posts, you've had a few big fish. So like how have you balanced your clientele? And is it just been referral based, or do you have certain things like you said where I'm passionate about this, so I'm going to chase that?
So client growth is, we started, very small, right? And so we just had to have proof of concept, proof of concept, proof of concept. What I found is, the difference between 10,000 and 100,000 is just a zero, right? And so it's pretty simple. We're not in a game where, it depends on your size. It really depends on, is your audience somewhere that we feel like we can grab them? And if so, then we're a fit. And it's also, there's a price tag attached to it. So you have to be willing to invest. What's awesome about today is that everybody gets the value, and that hasn't always been the case. And so in the early days, we were getting the people that wanted to be innovative. We were getting the people that wanted to try something different to stand out. Now, everybody's on social media. There's a ton of competition. And so we're using our experience and our strategies to help our clients stand out in that crowded space. And so a lot of the bigger clients that we've recently brought on have been through word of mouth referral. And I was just talking to one person that made one of those referrals, and she said, you're always in front of me on LinkedIn. And she's like, you're always doing something that align, like it's always something cool, it's always something big, and you're always out there, and I never see you rest. And she's like, I want somebody on my team that works like that. And so you were an easy recommendation for me. You're the only one that I kept seeing. And so you were, when it came up, I was like, oh, you got to talk to Shon.
So that's something I see with so many people in our role, whether it's social media marketing, pay-per-click, any of those roles. They think they don't have to do what they do for their clients. So how did you kind of take your own medicine, so to speak? Did you always do that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you had to, and even on my business pages, I don't post as much as I should, because it's kind of the cobbler's shoes. But me personally, like, my name is on the door right now, and I'm doing some pretty interesting things. And so I am out there for two things. One, it's business development, but I just want to shine a light on the cool stuff that my clients are doing, or the nonprofits that we're working with. Whether it's Sigma Nu Fraternity and some of the stuff that I'm doing with them, because that can then. Yeah, I just was talking to a young man at the University of Akron. His name is Keegan, and we met on a call and then connected up on social media. Now he's a new member of Sigma Nu through both personal and digital interactions. You never know where something could go if you just put it out there. But if you're not talking about all the things that you're into, and I'm sure there are people that are like, can Christy stop posting? Like, we really don't care. But that's not, the platform is for amplification. And so, I want people that appreciate that to subscribe, and the people that don't, like, they can go somewhere else. Like, I'm not forcing anybody to follow my stuff, but you never know what one post can do. And so there are stories like my buddy, you might even know this name, Matt Kolick, created at Kent State a t-shirt company through the entrepreneurship program, and I was a guest professor in there, and it became one of the leading national bodybuilding t-shirt brands as a class project. And he came up with kind of influencer marketing strategies before they were a thing, when Instagram first came out. And so he had tweeted this guy, Phil Heath, and then sent his t-shirts to him for the class project, and he put the picture on Instagram. It had like over 100,000 engagements to the t-shirt, and then he ends up launching the company steel clothing, and then flying around the world with Phil Heath, who then won Mr. Olympia and was like 8
We
times.
just watched. Did you see his documentary came out?
No.
It's
Matt did all of his clothing. So he created Gifted Athletics with Phil Heath, flew all around the world, sold his clothing line, had shakers and all kinds of different stuff that he was doing from a class project and through putting a post out on Twitter that ended up being an Instagram picture that ended up blowing up his company, create, $1 million in t-shirts. And you think about that's a difficult thing.
Yeah.
And it was all driven through social media.
Yeah, you're always one post away. I
Yep.
think that's a crazy concept that a lot of people, I mean, we had a company, Walk Your Plans, where, the first strategy session was pretty rough. I mean, they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to talk on camera. And I was like, let's just show your product. Let's just walk through a video where you show it. And then at like 8 p.m., I'm getting calls from the owners. And I'm like, oh man, I hope it's not a typo. And they're like, hey, is 400,000 good? I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then like 3 hours later, Katie starts texting me. She's like, hey, I'm on my way home. She's like, this video is over 700,000. And it just peaked up over 4. And I was like, that's only one post. But
Yep.
yeah, it can really happen when you put the right thing out there.
Yeah, it's just activity. And there are some things that you're going to think are going to be awesome and they're duds, and you're going to just throw some things out there and it's going to, blow up. You never know. We're dealing with humans. And so it's challenging.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you about the network thing because obviously that's how we're connected. Why did you join a fraternity when you were in college? Like, what was the motivation for you?
Leadership. I wanted to, in all the research that I did leading up to college, I think it was like 50% of U.S. presidents were Greek men. And just kind of looking at Congress and Senate, some of these things, you saw a lot of CEOs that were Greek. And so I'm like, I think I want to do this. And I was really looking for a leadership opportunity where I could jump in, learn a bunch of things, have a chance to lead peers, and then that would prepare me later for life, not to mention the network, right? The national network of people. And that has been one of the absolute best decisions that I've ever made. Now looking at it, I joined Sigma Nu in 1995, and next year will be 2025. So it'll be 30 years of Sigma Nu. And I've met so many incredible, just great people across the country that have been friends and business partners, colleagues, clients, just somebody to talk to, and it's been absolutely amazing for me.
And why do you think that bond is so strong with them? Just because shared experience?
Yeah, I think shared experience, like we, thinking about leading 100 peers that are 18 to 21, 22 years old, that's probably one of the most challenging things that you can do. I was just talking with a guy that's a collegiate advisor on our High Council, which is our national board of directors for Sigma Nu, and he was the president of a 305-man chapter with a huge monster budget, and I just can't imagine. That's a company. That is a legitimate company. And here's a young man at 21 years old that had that opportunity. He's going to be so far ahead of anybody graduating college at 21. Based on that experience. So I think it's shared experience. It's the challenge of the experience. It's the failures that you had doing it.
Yeah.
Because, as an 18 to 21-year-old, you're going to make mistakes, but you're doing it in a safe environment. You've got alumni that you can go to ask questions because you don't know what you don't know, even though you probably think you know everything. It's just been an incredible experience and something that I'm very proud of and that I'm proud to give back to, because those experiences that I had helped me get where I'm at today.
Yeah, like when I look back at my college experience, it was probably the only time period where I would say I learned tactical skills. I think you take classes where, maybe you get information and then the information falls out of your brain one day. But I remember there were so many lessons of just like how to recognize a good person, how to trust people, like when you can see those habits, don't run from them.
Yeah.
And at the time, I just remember it was like the whole Big Little Night. I was like, this all feels so unnecessary. This feels pointless. And then you get into business and you start to see these really snaky characters and you're like, that was all very necessary.
Yeah.
And it's very cool now that I'm actually like in the business world and I'm seeing a lot of these lessons now play off in real time. But I also think the fun part of it too is, there was that balance of you want to have fun and party, but you also are fundraising for these causes. And there was always that duality of like, yes, you can have the fun that no one else gets to have, but you also have to be responsible and do something for this whole.
Yeah, what is this? Yep, this is out of line. It doesn't feel right. And going involved and getting in groups like Rotary, they have a 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Does it build goodwill and better friendships and things like that? And so, I think good groups have ideals that they are cemented in, and those are kind of rudders for decision making, which have been good for me. Not that any of us don't make mistakes, but I hope that I make way more good decisions than I do bad decisions.
And do you think a lot of people are missing that in the world right now? They just don't really have their own creed.
Yeah, I think that's it's the creed of me right now, and I talk about it all the time. Like when I'm traveling, I just got back from Indiana University, and met over 100 amazing brothers doing amazing things, and I think that's one of the things we talk about. While Greek life is getting beat up in the news, because sadly there are bad things that happen, I think it's more needed now than ever. We need strong young men that are stepping up to lead and are prepared for the fights that are ahead. So I think it's absolutely needed, and I think that creed, those ethics behind it, if we use those things in the decision-making matrix, we'll be we'll be better off.
Yeah, I want to go down this route because it's something I talk a lot about off camera, but you're probably a good guy to talk to about it. And you can be very critical, what do you think is the weakness that my generation is currently experiencing that you don't think yours went through?
The everybody gets a trophy thing, I think. I grew up in a family of wrestlers, and it was very much like when we lost because of us. And nobody was coming to save us. Nobody was bailing us out. Nobody's, hey, like you need to work harder next time. You made and so we were always, I think, at least in my family, it was about being critical. Like, where do we do well? Where do we not do well? And then just do better. I see a lot of accountability issues in the generation, and that is a sweeping statement, right? That's not it's a case by case basis. But if I had to look at it from a 30,000 foot view, I've led youth sports programs, and I've seen some things, and I've seen how the parents yell at the refs and people don't want a ref. Like, it's hard to get refs to come because the parents are the problem, right? And probably everybody's seeing, not to say there aren't good parents. I see a ton of good parents, fundraising and showing up and doing the right things. But I think it's the parents, my kid's the best. He deserves, she deserves. Whereas, I try to not do that and kind of lean back into some of the things that I've learned. But it's like anything else in history. Like, there's a pendulum, and like maybe in my generation, and probably for sure in the generation before, those parents were so hard on those students and those kids that they didn't, when they grew up, they were like, I'm not letting that happen. And so instead of doing that, I'm going to go the opposite direction, and I'm going to be so yes. Nurture. And so now we're probably going to get to a point like, hey, we were too easy on them, and everybody got a trophy, and we're taking that away. We're to do this other thing, and it swings back the other way. So I think my gut is that this is not my area of expertise, but just as a father of 6 kids and kind of looking at it and being involved in a lot of travel sports at a high level, I see those types of things, and I'm sure the same thing happens academically. They should have got an A on that paper.
Yeah, and instead of writing a better paper, they want to argue with the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something, the reason I asked that is because I see it plaguing my generation at scale. I mean, I have probably, I would say, 5 business clients, friends, it's kind of merged, and we all hang out way longer than the 1-hour strategy session. And I kept asking myself, like, why does this happen? And I think it's because of how rare it is that there are young guys taking risk. And I think that's something that scares me because I end up wanting to do podcasts with you and everyone else that I know has already done a lot of the work. And when I look at guys my age, like what I was talking about before the podcast, they're stuck in these lifeless corporate positions that if they liked them, it's great. I would hype them up, but they don't like them. They feel stuck. And when they talk about doing anything like taking a risk, it's this foreign concept.
Well, so think about that. I think that's the best way to say it. It's a foreign concept. So imagine this. In my generation, the entrepreneurship program is just starting in college. So it's a foreign concept, probably because it's not being taught. So if your parents weren't entrepreneurs and they went to work and did a job, they're probably telling you, like, here's my experience, right? And so they're giving you the experience that they had, and it's a very small percentage of entrepreneurs. And if it's not being taught and those opportunities are not in school, then it seems like these things aren't for me. I think that we need to absolutely be out front and center and talking about, the lemonade stand as a kid, and like, hey, like I made lemonade and it costed $5, but I made $50. And so here's how margin works. And that's it. And I only spent 2 hours. Like, this is a really good thing as a 10-year-old, right? So I think giving kids the opportunity to see it in motion at a very small level, then they can kind of get the bug for it and understand how it works and see it as an opportunity. And I think it should absolutely be talked about in grade school, because a lot of times, like by high school, yes, I see some of these programs, but I think people have made decisions like, oh, I'm going to go and be an engineer, right? And that's great. Like we need all the things, especially the trades, right? But I think understanding how you could take that and make it your own is a pretty powerful thing.
Do you know who Naval Ravikant is?
I don't.
So he's like a Silicon Valley angel investor guy. And there's a podcast with Joe Rogan where he talks about by the year 2030, you'll wake up and your jobs will just be on your phone. You're going to have 10 different jobs and they're all going to be via notification. And what's funny is I think you and I have self-created that. And I think a lot of people out there can't fathom the idea of I won't have one job. I might have 3 marginalized jobs that are just a little bit of each of them. And the thing that I try to tell so many people is you don't have to quit your job, but try something on your own. Just try it and see what happens, because I think the other thing, maybe it's the participation trophy that kills my generation is, like, I have a buddy who he tried doing a social media company, maybe got 3 or 4 clients and then stopped doing it. And then it was like, oh, I failed tremendously. But it's like, no, you just stopped.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things that maybe everyone's afraid to do is they're afraid to fail. Because when I was growing up, I think it was in middle school, high school, an insult was to call someone a tryhard. And when you think about, like, that's terrible for a young generation to come up with, where it's like, oh, why is he trying so hard?
Yeah.
When it's like, now that we're all adults, we still see that in them, where it's like, oh, bro, why are you working so late? And it's like, because I want this to grow.
But it might be Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, but there's a drawing of 2 people that are digging kind of a cave into the ground, and like there's gold like 2 strokes away from the pick, and the person gets tired because it's been too long. They thought they should have had it by now, and the other person keeps going and finally hits it. I think if you just keep going, like something's going, it may not be exactly what you think you're going to dig up, but you're going to find the thing that you were supposed to find in the effort. Well, and it might even just be the learning opportunity. Like, hey, like I can apply this to what I, just figured out over here, and I can make this part win. Versus I thought it was a social media company, but it's actually going to be web design or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So what are the signs you see of, like, because obviously you're probably seeing a ton of guys go through that phase of, they were a boy, now they're trying to become a man, start their life. Maybe they have a girlfriend they want to turn into their wife. What are the signs that they're going to do well from your eyes? Work
ethic, I think, is the biggest thing. Because if you can put that focused intensity behind any direction that you want, you're going to get to where you want to go. And kind of seeing the vision. I talk about, okay, hey guys, we have to have a vision for what we want our life to look like. And I was listening to an Ed Milet podcast actually on the way up here, and he was talking about projecting and kind of really seeing what that thing is and looking into the future instead of always kind of looking in the rear view, like, hey, like I did really good in college here and like I was really good at this, but like where do you really want to go and have some vision around that? And then again, reverse engineer all of the things that you're going to need to do to get there. And it might be a 5-year plan, it might be a 3-month plan, but A, you have to have vision, then B, you have to have a plan, and then you have to execute the plan, and then analyze that over the time period. Maybe it's a week or a month, and say, okay, am I winning or am I losing? And then course correct. But you can't just keep doing the thing for a month or a year and then go, oh, well, I didn't make it to where I wanted to go. Well, you were going, but you needed to go west and you're going east. And so you made it all that way, but you just didn't have the right trajectory. So just making sure you're correcting course as you're looking at those things. I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy, right?
Yeah, simple, not easy. I hate that term, but it's accurate.
It's accurate.
Yeah. And a lot of this, like, business is simple. It's just, it's not easy, and humans are hard, and you have to kind of go through a lot of that. What is the biggest thing you've had to go through in your career? Not on the tactical side, but more on the work on Shon's side.
I think, asking for help, I think is a big thing for me. One of the mistakes that I made early on that I wish that, if people ask me, like, if I could go back to year 1, Shon, what would you do differently? And I think about, having a mentor. Like, I was figuring out things that hadn't happened. I just went, well, nobody knows, this is a new thing. Nobody's done it before. So I'm just going to figure it out. And I want to be the guy to figure it out. But I probably could have been 5 years ahead if I would have got, just somebody that had run an agency before and, hey, like, this is what you should pay attention to. And here's how workflows work. And here's what you should do for billing. Like, I learned a huge lesson in billing. Like, I was doing all this work, and let's say for the month of April, I did a month's worth of work, and then I'd bill it, and then they'd take 60 days to pay. Well, if all of my clients are doing that, and I've got a payroll, and I've got 10 clients that are paying 60 days late, I'm severely in the red, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm like, oh, well, to fix that, I should pre-bill and say, hey, you have to pay before I do the work, and all of a sudden that solved the problem. But like, I'm 90 days in to my first company going, wow, this isn't really working great. And so that was like a painful lesson that I had to learn. And I wish that I would have just had some mentors that I would have brought alongside me and said, okay, like, what should I be looking out for? What am I not considering? Because I don't know what I don't know. I was just going and doing the thing and running in a million different directions and then going, oh, this worked. I could have really shortcut my success if I would have asked for help early.
And why do you think so many of these Ohio guys do that? Like I have all these guys, they have a great business, and then I'm like, oh, well, what coaching have you done? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Like why do you think it's that fear?
I don't know if it's fear or if it's arrogance or what it is. I don't know what the answer. For me, like I just wanted to do, like I wanted to say that I did it. So maybe a little bit of pride, right? And I don't think I was arrogant, but I might have been prideful. Like I'm going to do this thing on my own because I didn't want the extra help, but that was the wrong way to look at it. In hindsight.
So I have a funny story about this. When I was about a year in, I remember I had this goal. I want to be the big solopreneur guy. I don't want help from anyone. I want to do it all myself. And at the time, I had not decided to go all in on short form video. And Katie, my girlfriend, had 100,000 views a month on TikTok. And we watched the movie My Cousin Vinny. And I'm watching this movie. And at the end, for anyone who hasn't seen it, basically he has to ask his girlfriend for help. And she solves the entire case. And there's just this moment where I was like so mad at the movie. And I realized like, I'm mad at me right now. I have someone right here who could be a huge asset. And then I did. I made the change. But yeah, that first round of asking for help is the hardest, bar none. Because it's almost this, like you have to admit you lost doing it alone, but you win doing what you actually want to do.
Sure. There's a term that I learned my senior year in college, and it was called escalation of commitment. Have you ever heard this phrase? It's one of those things, like you're so into your idea that you will drive it all the way, even if it sinks the boat, because you don't want to give up on your idea, right? And so it's kind of like one of those things, like there was something that I was planning, and I was so into it, and I felt so strongly about it, but like all the signs were there that this thing couldn't work. And then finally the dean pulled the plug. It was a huge project, like a huge statewide project. And I'm like, we've spent all this time, like we have to keep going. But I regardless of all the warning signs, I was going to drive this thing off the cliff until like somebody above me was like, boop, nope, we're pulling the plug. Like there's nothing you can do now because it's out of your hands. But that was a good lesson for me to go, okay, like this could be a really good idea, and I'm not about giving up on my dreams. But every sign is there for this way is not going to work. So what do we do differently, right?
Yeah, I remember, so this is like 4 or 5 months into having a company. So Katie was visiting her family in Connecticut, so I was home alone for the first time during COVID. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I feel like I can't figure this stuff out on my own. And I remember journaling that day that I was quitting my business. I was like, I'm done doing this. I'm just going to pay someone else who knows how to do this. I feel like I was like cheating on my homework.
Wow.
And I thought that day was like the biggest loss I ever took. Now in hindsight, that was actually the only thing that made it a real business. But it was this basic like agency starter plan that Tyler Narducci, shout out. But yeah, it was basically just like what you said, how to set up your billing, like how to plan a content calendar. And yeah, for anyone out there watching, like you got to just admit you don't know it all. You do not know everything.
Yeah. What are my strengths? What am I best at? What's my highest and best use? And what are the things that I'm not that great at or I have concerns about doing? And if you don't know that, you're probably going to learn very quickly, because those are the things that you're going to put off. Be like, like that needs done in an hour. How am I going to get that done? And so those are the things that are probably the easiest things to hand, and the things that you should hand off first.
And they're always something embarrassing. Like mine was sending a DocuSign. I would get someone to be like, yeah, let's work together. I'm excited. They'd even pay the invoice before it sometimes. And Katie's like, did you send the agreement over? And this is literally like me changing 3 lines of text. But for something in my head, it just wasn't me.
My thing is like I'm terrible with proposals. I'm like, because they're all like customized. When I started my first company, I had a 8.5 by 11 with an 8.5 by 11 contract on the back. And it was like, you could have, the platinum, gold, or silver program. And this is what you get with them. And like, everything would be, I want that one. Give me the extra value meal with the large Coke and fry, boom. And so easy. And then when I got into this last iteration, we do super customized proposals, and they take a long time. And I'm like, I got to get that proposal out.
Yeah.
I got to get that proposal out. But it's like, I'm the only one that's been in the initial conversation, so I know exactly what it needs to be, and then therefore I don't want to hand it off. But that's probably something, follow up with me in like 30 to 60 days. It's probably something that I'm going to hand off. Yep.
Yeah. So where you're at now, what do you think are the hardest things you're going through? Like, what are you still figuring out?
The changes in my environment, right? And we've talked a little bit about it when we did our Zoom a while back. my environment's changing. And so I just got back from social media marketing world out in San Diego, and all the conversation is around AI and how there's going to be this big shift in the human capital and what people do and do not do in the marketing, and what does AI do for the marketing. And so like I consider myself somewhat a marketing futurist and trying to look in the crystal ball and do it again. Like, what's the next thing? And so, we looked at, okay, if agencies are going to get beat up in this from a content production standpoint, which I do think is going to happen, and I hear it all the time when I'm talking with people. Oh yeah, like I just did this thing and it only took me 5 minutes to do and I got my whole week done. Well, if the perception is, whether it's the truth or not, if the perception is, because perception is reality, that it takes now 10 minutes to do what it takes hours for an agency to do, then those people are not going to find the value to pay an agency rate to get that work done.
Yeah.
Now, everybody's not going to be in that boat, but there's a growing population of these people, and that will continue to grow, especially as AI starts to become smarter, better, faster, stronger. And so looking at this fractional employment where we lease people to companies that are trained in AI. So you've got an embedded employee that can do the social media work and they can do it fast.
Yeah.
I think, a fractional person that's well trained could beat an agency 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of layers of conversation. Now, your company may require those layers, right?
Yeah.
But the general, from what I've seen in my travels over the last 15 years or so, most people don't need that level of service. They're just like, hey, solve my problem, get my social stuff out,
Yeah.
and make sure it's good and it's on brand and it's driving the things that we want it to drive. Easy enough. And then even looking at, okay, what if AI took over all of content creation? I don't think that's going to happen, but let's just play the worst case scenario.
Yeah, say it does.
Say it does. The human still has to consume the content. And so when I was doing my 75 hard and I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to Huberman and just a lot of great interviews from marketers, I'm like, man, I really want to be the person that understands how the human brain works and is taking in this social media content so that we can optimize social media campaigns and be better than anybody when it comes to deployment of social campaigns. So let's say AI creates 10 campaigns. I can do the research and tell you which of the 10 is going to perform better and why. And so that's when my idea of neurosocial and neurosocial labs was created. I am now transitioning into the behavioral science side of it. And we're still doing all the same things that we've done, social media strategy and social media management and consulting. But I'm really building up the neuroscience part of that because that helps my current client base. And it also builds my future, being first to market with this public-private partnership that we have with the University of Akron, and they're going to make an announcement next week at the Taylor Institute's 20th anniversary party, and kind of say, hey, here's one of the programs that we're going to launch for the future, and it's going to be awesome experiential learning for the students. They're going to be able to see the eye tracking, emotional tracking, heart rate, body temperature, all that good stuff, and how people are reacting visibly and with their mouse to whatever those social campaigns are. So that's where I'm kind of transitioning to, and it would be great for nothing to change. I'm even stronger as an agency because I have this, but say it does change, now I'm in the pole position with this new thing that nobody else is doing.
Yeah, that's approach we took because I think it was November, not of this year, but the one before when AI, basically I think it was ChatGPT hit the mass user amount.
Yep.
And I watched The Matrix that night and quickly, I was like, it was a rough night, but I basically had to realize like I can fully be replaced. And what was nice about that is it actually gave me permission to use the AI for things that we need to. Like there are certain things where like a human doesn't always have to timestamp this podcast. Like the AI can do it and then a human can check that and make sure that's what we want it to be, then go in and put like creative flair on it.
Yes.
And what it opened up a lot of time for me to do was in-person directing, actually focusing way deeper on the strategy, which like you're going, balls to the wall with like the data for it. But I think that's the thing that excites me is I see it coming back to where marketing can be fun again. I think when all of the labor can be done by the AI and it's back to just being the creative fun side, I look forward to it. And I didn't, when it first came out, I mean, man, I was like, all right, well, I could drive for Uber. Nope, that's going to be automated. And then you just kind of go through all these things where you're like, everything's going to be automated. But I do think in a world where automation is everything, people are going to be where a lot of the currency goes to.
Yeah, well, it's just a reallocation of hours, right? And to your point, it's going to be to the creatives and the strategists that can deploy it the best and the most efficiently. So it's an exciting time, and I think as marketers coming out of school and college, and this is one of the things that we're diving into at the University of Akron. I'm leading our AI task force, and what does this mean for the future of business education in the marketing department? And again, we're not looking at, okay, here's the bad stuff. We're just projecting into the future. Like, what could it be? Let's dream a little bit. What does it look like in the best case scenario? And then how do we give that experience to our students? Because our tagline is experience business. How do we give that to our students in a package so that they're coming out of school and they feel comfortable and confident using these tools instead of saying, oh, you can't use that. Like, we have calculators and we can shortcut it and we can go really fast and figure out these complex formulas in 2 seconds. Why would we make anybody handwrite that? We want our students to be stronger, faster, more well-equipped, right? And so I think that we're doing that. We're working on that both in the classroom from a curricular perspective and workshop perspective, but also in learning opportunities that are outside of the university. Like we've got MyCon in Cleveland. We've got all these resources in our backyard. Let's bring speakers in. Let's talk about in career services how you can interview and talk about your experience with AI, and your prompt usage, and show your critical thinking skills in using these tools. I think our students will be better off for that. So it's an exciting time to me.
Yeah. What do you think is what is something that's already happened that you wouldn't have predicted?
So this is something that I just heard at a conference, and it blew my mind that this college group is using ChatGPT for search more than Google. That blows my mind.
Yeah, Google's always been the titan that can never get knocked down.
Yep.
But
and it's showing its first sign of weakness with that statistic that was said at social media marketing world. And I just sat back and I was like, wow, what are the implications of that? And how do you prepare for that as a business?
yeah, I mean, imagine ChatGPT with those top 3 ads where it's like these answers were paid for, the rest of the answers, good luck. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changes a lot. And
so like individualized GPTs for organizations. Like I have this international energy client, and they've got this book that they call their Bible, and it's got like all of their data, all of the different products and how to use them. It's this huge print book, and the marketing team will use it in research for some of the posts that they do, and they're digging into a large book. What if you could just ask it questions to pull any information around hydrogen-based energy or whatever it might be in a quick internal GPT that's based off of all of your data? So it's closed, it's all of your data. I can pull it within seconds instead of having to dig through a book. And so taking the archives that you have, maybe it's, organizational history as an example. Instead of digging through the archives, it's all in your closed GPT that you can look things up very quickly to get that information to then use in marketing. You could find images, video, whatever it might be, instead of clicking through and trying to dig through all of this stuff. Think about speed and efficiency. So I'm a speed and efficiency guy here. What are the things that take us the most time? How can we use technology to make us more efficient? And then we can, again, use that time to be more creative, strategic, or building still personal relationships. So as much as I love technology, I'm kind of in that weird generation that had the first computer lab at the University of Akron, and also understood what it was like before. So I've kind of seen both, and I learned with the handshake deal and like the personal networking stuff, and then I'm just scaling it with my technology. So I think that there's value to both sides and blending them together. In all situations, like there's no cookie cutter approach. They're not all created equal. And so
it'd
how
be
do
nice
you
if
use
there
your
was,
skills? Yeah, right? Like when A happens, do B, and success.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find interesting is when COVID happened, everything went from being this to this. And I saw a ton of these media companies that, let's say they had 40 to 100K worth of equipment that shot everything horizontal. When vertical TikTok came out, there was this massive shift. So when you saw TikTok coming on the scene, let's say 2019, right before COVID, what were your thoughts of it then, and what are your thoughts with it now?
So I was introduced to TikTok because I have daughters that do travel competitive cheer. And so like they were early adopters of TikTok. So we would be at competitions and you would just see the girls like all posted up around like the lobby of a hotel, doing the different dances and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, like, this is going to be a thing. If it's usually you can tell that something is going to be a thing based on the younger populations, right? So you think about, Facebook and Twitter in the early days, it was all the college students. And so then it took a while to get to the older population. So I saw that happening there and I'm like, okay, like game over, right?
Yep.
That's going to happen because they're going to be the longer term consumers. And now you look at it and it's, I can remember 2020, it's probably 2020, I was doing a presentation, a marketing presentation to a group of Brazilian executives, and I was looking at the top maybe 5 to 10. I think it was top 5 social media platforms in Brazil at the time. And then it got shut down from COVID, and TikTok was not in there. When we came back, and I think it was, I don't know, 2022, maybe end of 2021, it was probably 2022. TikTok had jumped to number 4 just through the COVID pause. And so like meteoric rise to the T. So it's changed the way that we consume our content for sure.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things that's fascinating is where like editing, I would say, has probably raised in value, but I would say production, meaning like the camera equipment and how it is, I actually think does better when it's almost down a little bit.
The statistics would tell you that too.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of leaned in because I mean, there's probably 5 photographers that are going to dog me for saying I shoot with an iPhone, but the truth is it's what everyone's used to. It's what feels more organic, and then you put a little effort into editing, and then you got a clean video, but. How long do you think until that feels like the old thing?
I don't know, man. Technology's changing so fast. Maybe 2 years. I'm a big fan of the metaverse. I think that there's going to be significant application there. It's just not where it needs to be today. So I think that this VR, when we see the next shift, I think it's going to go from that to VR, or at least a very significant augmented reality scenario, and that's when we're going to start to see the shift when the wearables are working, the Oculus or the glasses or whatever they are. I think that's going to be the shift from that form of video to kind of this real life experience. I call it experiential social, where we're going to be participating in a different environment.
So 2 of our clients I'm very proud of. Shout out Stacy, Drew, and Carly. They have done the Meta glasses very well. So Drew and Carly run a cleaning company, and one of the biggest things for cleaning content is I want to see something dirty and I want to see it clean.
Yeah.
And so now they're giving these first-person shooter of everything they're going to do for the homeowner, which is more experiential.
Yes.
Way less production.
Yep.
And then Stacy's a luxury realtor down in like Naples, Fort Myers, and what she's started doing is she has a media team that does like the photos. We do like edits of the iPhone stuff, but she's now done these videos where she just turns them on and just walks through the house and talks as the realtor because a lot of her buyers are in Europe, Midwest, California. And it's just this new level of, it's a different piece, but like you said, it's a wearable. Mm-hmm. So now there's this huge layer of friction that's now been removed in terms of how to create.
Yeah. And I mean, you're seeing it firsthand the same way that I'm seeing it. So it's experiential in that way. And I think in social, what we found historically is authenticity always wins, which is why that production component is so important with this.
Yeah, and there's that joke Gary Vee makes where he's like, watch the first TV commercial. And I forget what company it is, but they basically just did a radio ad with a photo. And the whole concept was like a lot of times when a new platform comes out, we take the old thing that worked and try to throw it on the new one.
Yes.
And so I think it's very funny now because I see these kids that are like 5 years younger than me. So they're like 20, 21. And what they're doing is they're like, let's say they're in a sales role. They're literally recording their own sales calls. That's their content, which in the past was such this privacy thing. Don't share that, keep it internal. And it's like, but it's experiential. I'm now on the phone with you, I feel like, and you're getting that. And I think the experiential shift is going to be a huge one. And I'm excited for it. I mean, I think what you're doing with everything is like, it's very motivating. I'll say that, like from where I'm at, seeing guys like you take that big action. One, it gives me hope that this is going to be a way more creative, fun job in 10 to 15 years. But 2, I think it is going to be wild how much data we have on just human behavior in the next couple of years. Because I think that's something that social media did to everyone. It pulled all these stats out that we wanted to keep under the rug. And, the funniest thing I do on every sales call, it has nothing to do with content, is I go, what content does your phone show you that you're tired of seeing? I always ask that just as like a sideball. I like it's part of the presentation. And when I hear someone go, well, I hate that it shows me this, I'm like, well, you engage with that all the time.
So give me an example of some like the craziest thing somebody said.
Every middle-aged guy. I don't know why it shows me ass all the time. I don't even like looking at it, but every single video I see, it's on there. And I'm like, that's interesting. Yeah. And then 2 minutes later, we're like, okay, but you're going to talk about these topics because it shows to people based off topics. And they're like, I love it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Or like the one goofiest thing I've had on a call was, I think it was like 2 or 3 months ago. This lady was like interested in working with us. Her business was new. So I was like, maybe we're not a good fit yet. But she goes, I don't think I have the breath work to do all the content. And I was like, breath work? What do you mean? She goes, I've seen a couple of your clients work and like they can talk for a whole minute without ever taking a breath. And I was like, okay, we edit those just so you know. And it was like this permission thing, but it was crazy to me to think that that was what was holding her up. It wasn't like anything else. It's just she thought people don't, I guess, pause for air.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, the things, yeah, because you know what it looks like. So it's she doesn't know what she doesn't know. There it is again.
She's never seen the raw file.
Yep.
And I was even today before this, I was doing a video shoot, and this guy was getting down on himself. He's like, "Oh, I messed up again." I'm like, "Keep messing up. We will take care of that." And I think a lot of people, that's what they do. They just don't give themselves that permission of like, what I need to ask for help might be goofy, but at the end of the day, there are no stupid questions.
Yeah, take imperfect action, I think, is the lesson to learn there, because 90% of people aren't going to take any action. So even your imperfect action puts you well above your peers and your competitors.
Where you're at, do you still feel like a lot of what you do is imperfect action?
Yeah, because you don't know. I think so. Like, I'm going to use my experience to tell me that I think these things are going to work, but what happens when it doesn't work? Then you got to go back. Okay, like why didn't that work? What are other directions that we could go? Like, I think if I'm just curious, like the answers will come, and I try different things. One of my favorite books, and I'm a big fan of Stoicism, is The Obstacle is the Way. And that's kind of how I got into when I saw ChatGPT. It was like the biggest obstacle that I've seen in the history of my company. And I'm like, okay, this is a major one. This is one that's going to cause people to quit. And so, like, how do I take this new environment and own the environment, but just in a different way? And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to try this thing, and I'm going to throw some stuff out and see if it works. So this fractional thing, we did a couple pilots, and I learned some things that didn't go well, but I'm like, I can now actually prove that this thing can do better than you hiring an agency. And here's the body of work that I have to prove that. Same thing with this neurosocial thing. Like, I'm like, okay, like, all right, AI takes the whole thing. What still, what are the ways that social media can still be managed from my perspective? Well, I can manage the data side of that. And so now we're doing our first pilot with RPT Clinic up in Michigan. It's an incredible robotic physical therapy arm that is like nothing I've ever seen. I've had the therapy, and I'm like, this is going to be $1 billion company. And I was like, one of the things that we need to learn is what is confusing people when it comes to their social media, and what do they really latch onto? Because it's all a new concept. Have you ever seen a robotic physical therapist? Right. And so, like, that's kind of a unique new thing that I need more information. Well, what information? There's a lot of information you could get. What is the most important information? And so we're doing a really cool study in our pilot program with them to be able to unearth all of that. And we feel like that's going to be a game changer for their marketing and definitely worth the time and investment. And so, but I had to figure out, like, what are these other things? And that obstacle is what pushed me in these other directions that I would have never considered before, because I was comfortable with this thing, and we've done it more than anybody else. We're more experienced, blah, 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 blah. But this was like a really cool thing. Like, I feel young again. I'm like, all right, this is my new thing. And like, I think that there's something to launching that first company and that feeling that you get when you're like, hey, like, this is exciting. Like, every day is a new adventure. Like, I feel like that again after 14 years of doing the same thing. I'm like, this is something that nobody else has done, and I get to figure it out. But I'm going to get mentors that know more than me in these things now. So I'm going to use all my lessons and build them into this new thing. And I think this could be a huge international thing.
Yeah, I think, for me, I think the excitement with AI is just probably step one of constantly reminding yourself, I don't know this, and it is new.
Yeah.
Because I think you and I are in a unique position. We'll probably watch this podcast in 10 years where we have no idea what this is going to be.
Yeah.
There's no clue. But right now, I'm going to give my prediction just so this is fun to timestamp. I think in, let's say, 5 to 10 years, I think a lot of the jobs that we would consider labor jobs, I don't think will be here. I think we as humans seek comfort, and I think technology will always follow that. But what I think humans also seek is connection. And in the midst of losing connection to the labor, I think we're going to gain a lot of connection to others. Meaning, I think there's going to be jobs that come out that if you told someone today, our dads would go, that's not a job.
Yep.
But I do think that's going to happen because I see more and more people asking, hey, I don't have the budget for you to do all the editing, all the production, and the filming. I want to pay for the strategy. And to me, I was like, that's interesting. You want the human brain. Even though this is all the labor, you want the brain. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a very creative world.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the beauty of the human brain is kind of that the dreaming, right? And to come up with things that have never been thought of before. Like, that's exciting.
Yeah, new thought. Yeah, where do you see the traditional jobs in 5 to 10 years? Like, how much do you see is automated and how much is just a completely new role that humans are now valuing?
I think that you have a lot of good points. I would probably lean into what you're talking about. I like the idea, and I didn't consider it like this until you said it, because I think of the future as WALL-E, like everybody on the spaceship in the goggles and like having food delivered to them and not moving. But I think the connectivity part that you're talking about makes a lot of sense. So in the absence of this, we still crave it. Like it's in our DNA. So it's going to help us reconnect because people would say that social media has us so disconnected because we're always on our phones. Maybe that's part of the pendulum shift is this more interpersonal communication, and maybe part of it is in an Oculus or some type of goggle, but you're actually seeing the faces because we can only be here doing this podcast together right now. And we may have friends all over the country. And so talking to somebody in California that's 3 hours behind us, that's just not a possibility. But now we're connected in a more meaningful way using technology like an Oculus or some type of VR tool. I think is kind of neat.
One of the concepts I've always journaled about is that social media is the sticky bridge. And the reason why I wrote it that way is I see so many people get stuck on it. When they were created, it was not meant for you. I mean, yes, the app, Facebook and Zuckerberg, they want you on there all day. Tell advertisers it costs more. But the real goal is you go on there and connect with a new person in real life that you traditionally wouldn't have met. And the way I first saw this was in high school. We had a joke of, oh, we're Facebook friends. We're not school friends. Meaning that's not someone you're going to talk to at the lunch table, but you're going to play a video game with them that night and you're going to have this digital relationship. And then you leave high school and you're like, oh, we're the only ones that are actually friends in real life now. And so what I see, especially with business owners a lot of the time too, is they'll delegate a lot of the work of go create, go advertise, go do this for me. But then they get all these connections or leads or whatever you want to call them that they don't touch. And so there's that moment where it's like they got confused on what this is. They thought it was the destination and it wasn't. It was the bridge.
Yeah, the sticky bridge. I like that. Yeah, man, it's I try to turn again, like I'm in this weird generation, so I love the digital, but I try to build those human connections. And so I was on LinkedIn and I had announced the Neurosocial Lab and the work that we were doing. And a friend of mine from the University of Akron who lives in North Carolina reaches out and says, hey, like you love what you're doing. I think this is absolutely the way. She also works in marketing. And she's like, I had a neighbor that is like a world leader in behavioral science down in Texas. He's in Dallas. His name is Will Leach. And she's like, I'm going to connect you up on LinkedIn. So I connect with him. And then it just so happened that I'm speaking at a conference in Dallas. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, man, like I'm going to be in Dallas. We should grab a beer. And he's like, absolutely. So he came to the hotel. We talked for like 2 hours about data and analytics and behavioral science. And he was doing like high-end work for Pepsi. And so he has a book. He won the top marketing research podcast a year or two ago. Just one of the most brilliant brains in marketing, behavioral science that I've ever had the opportunity to sit down with. So shout out to Will if he listens. But just blown away, and I learned so much in that 2 hours. Like it really convinced me that I'm on the right path. He's like, Shon, he's like, nobody's doing this type of work. He's like, if you just tackle this and you go all in on it, he's like, people need to understand why the things work because marketers too often just put pretty things out like, oh, it looks really good. Hey, I think it looks good too. But you don't know if it's working. Like words matter, color choices, but like these things all matter. And then to be able to prove that through, a scientific method, that's the secret sauce right there. So I was really encouraged, and that would have never happened but for a post on LinkedIn that turned into conversations that then created human interaction.
How do you handle the responsibility of the role you're stepping into? Because whether you admit it to yourself or if it psychs you out, I don't know. But you do realize that guys like you are actually writing the blueprint for a lot of human behavior at scale. Like, do you ever think about the amount of actual brains your work is going to touch?
I haven't. It's kind of the one foot in front of the other. Like I'm the daily executor, right? So back in the day, one of the things that I found is like I would get so stuck in the future and thinking about all those things that it actually slowed me down from acting. So like I know where I want to go and I put it there and then I backtracked and I said, okay, all I can do is what I have in front of me today and I have to do this thing. So I actually haven't thought about it, but it's kind of cool now that you say that to think about like, hey, like you never know what the ripple effect of this thing is going to be, the success that it could help companies have, right? If I can make somebody's campaign 10 times better, especially a small to medium-sized business, that could change their family trajectory, right? Through a series of marketing campaigns and transform their businesses. And I think that that's pretty cool. And to be able to work with some of the larger national brands and, really put my stake in the ground and say, hey, because, you guys worked with us, we were able to do X for you. Like that's a really cool thing to think about. And then collectively, after years of gathering data from different markets, to be able to dissect that and say, okay, here's what we learned about this particular demographic psychographic based on all the work that we've done for all of the different clients. That's going to be some real cool data in the next couple of years to look at.
Because that's what I'm curious about is how do you balance I know I'm hiking this mountain, but sometimes you got to just pause and look over the side.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's good to do. So I'm also a guy that works hard but likes to play hard and have those experiences. And that's part of the quote that you started with is kind of looking at it going, yeah, like I don't want to just be in a lab all the time or behind my computer all the time. I want to be able to travel and go see different things and try new things. One of the other things that Ed Milet podcast was talking about today that I listened to was that humans do the same thing over and over and over and over. And he's like, it doesn't, he's like, I would just challenge you to change things up, be in different environments, look at things differently. If you go to work this way, go to work a different, break out of your patterns so that you're experiencing new things, and that will help with your creativity. And I really took that to heart. Like, I'm going to go different directions. Instead of hiking this path, I'm going to go to a completely different one that I've never been to before, just to see what happens and get me out of my regular environment.
Yeah, because I think I'm right now I'm in that. So tomorrow we leave for our first 10-day vacation since starting a company, which nervous as shit about it, but we'll figure it out. But that's something that when I was journaling, because I do every morning, it's called morning pages, where you get up, no coffee, nothing, you just have to fill a page of paper. And one of the things I wrote about was, I'm worried, there's this quote, you're moving too fast to turn inertia. And I have to ask myself, like, when am I moving too fast to even turn? And I think I'm in one of those positions right now where things are going well, we're growing, but I get excited by a lot of this stuff. And I don't think it's necessarily shiny object. I think it's just the next level of evolution. And I don't think I ever really make any change until we do this, where we go to the Smokies, I do a big hike. And when I'm dehydrated and need a granola bar, it's like, oh, this is what I need to do with my life. And that thought just like pops in.
Yeah. They're kind of forced pauses just based on the things that you're up to.
Yeah. Honestly, dude, I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of fun. I'll definitely have to have you back on in a little bit to make sure you got a mentor. But seriously, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That was awesome. All right, guys, we will see you next time on the Figuring Out podcast.